Now let's take a look at the overview, right, of this nor'easter. And this is a great way to start it, is just with one impact. This is the flooding rain impact, so kind of representative of the heavy rain that's falling from the sky, its ability to collect in too short of a time frame, but it covers the timeline. Friday, today, we're looking at the coast of Florida, but by the time we get through the weekend into Monday, we're all the way into coastal areas of New England.
Yeah, I think, and today, when you look at the flood threat, we do have the low that's going to develop off the southeastern coast, but it's been that stalled boundary that's been enhancing those rain showers from southern South Carolina down through the Florida coast. And then we see it get enhanced with that heavy rain complements of that area of low pressure, as you mentioned, all the way into the northeast.
So here's the overview. Everything you can imagine with a nor'easter will be dealt out across the East Coast. The wind, the coastal flooding, the heavy rain. The only exception is no snow. Not cold enough for that quite yet. But man, could you imagine that?
I can.
I have to tell you, the possibility here for the path of this for the Northeast, if it was January, we would finally get what people have been waiting for like over 10 years.
Yeah.
But alas, it is October. With that said, you got to get ready today. Today is a great prep day, even in the Southeast. We do have some communities where they're opening up parking garages. Charleston is one of them, because some of these low-lying spots that typically flood are going to flood. I mean, they've been flooding because of the tidal cycle, but now we have our coastal storm. So here's the evolution. The low closes off by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning is kind of the last ditch effort. It will happen by then. And as the low moves up the coast, the impacts move up the coast. Now, we could see a bigger player with wind, Virginia northward, just because the relationship between this high pressure and the low pressure.
Yeah.
And, although there is some uncertainty still left for the Northeast, I don't think we're going to see a big change with the winds, because a lot of this wind is driven by that big synoptic change, that high pressure to the low pressure. And that's not going to change that dramatically, even if we keep this thing maybe a little bit farther off to the coast. I think we'll still have some windy conditions.
Yeah, the wind will come in before the rain. So, and things, if, for example, in the Northeast, you're still going to have this area of low pressure far to the south, closer to the mid-Atlantic, North Carolina, but the wind gusts begin Saturday and just really intensify into Sunday. It is a very long duration event as well for many people dealing with the wind from North Carolina to New York, and the winds could be especially strong there, not to mention the rain. Looks like it'll be, it's as it gets closer to Monday, it's looking like some of the higher totals could be along the Jersey Shore and even up to Boston.
3 to 5 inches rain is a lot of rain for the Northeast, especially considering the time frame. I mean, it's really like a 36-hour window that you're going to dump 3 to 5 inches of rain on a very populated stretch of our country. So today's a good day to clean out the drains, make sure the gutters are clean. Mine are a mess, so I have my afternoon project.
Yeah, leaves are falling. You were talking about that yesterday in terms of the gutters. I think one thing that'll be helpful if some areas have been in a drought. So hopefully it helps us manage the heavy rain, right? Yeah. So let's take it into South Carolina. We have a live look at Isle of Palms this morning. 61, feels like 61s, but look at the wind already picking up out of the northeast at 18 miles per hour. But remember, we don't have that closed off area of low pressure yet. We don't have our nor'easter. It's really been just a culprit of that stalled front. But we're looking at high wind, high surf, and rain that'll continue to impact portions of South Carolina. And it'll only get more intense as we head into the weekend.
Yeah, let's bring in Fox weather meteorologist Bain Froney. She's been kind of scouring the coastline. Bain, you've been in and around South Carolina. This morning, you're popping into Charleston. Interesting because, we talked to the leadership in South Carolina, in Charleston, and they were talking about how they were going to open up the parking garages so people could really protect their property. What's the feel this morning?
Yeah, absolutely, Britta and Marissa. This morning, looking on the roads currently, you don't have that much flooding. And this is because here in Charleston, the flooding really starts to happen when high tide comes in. And this is because those storm drains, they kind of pull in all of that water from that high tide and it overflows them. And that's why we end up seeing a lot of that flooding on the streetways during the afternoon when it's at the highest tide. And of course, we're still dealing with that rough surf and parts of king tides as well. So a lot of folks are preparing for that, getting their vehicles in higher locations, like you said there, Britta, utilizing those parking garages to get their cars up a lot higher because they know that that flooding is going to be coming on in. And now this is an area where we're at right now in Charleston, downtown Charleston, which is known to flood very, very quickly when that high tide comes in, just normally. And again, we have king tides going on. So we could potentially see the 18th highest tide today that Charleston has ever seen on record. And that just goes to show that some intense flooding could be happening over the next couple of hours here. So that's where we're currently located. But on top of this, we have a lot of those showers, those storms that are just offshore right now. We're expecting to see that rain coming in within the next few hours. So adding a little bit of insult to injury, you guys. I mean, we could see an extra 2 to 3 inches by the time we get through the end of the afternoon today, just from a little bit of that rain that's going to be rolling on in. On top of this, we have that front that stalled. It's a lot cooler. It's chilly out here. And the wind gust. I have my anemometer here, and I just measured about a 15 to 20 mile per hour wind gust already this morning, and we're expecting those winds to really start to pick up. But I do want to go back to yesterday, because even yesterday we had intense high tides coming on in, impacting the beaches, that beach erosion. I do believe we have a time lapse that we can show you from those high tides that rolled on in. The video that we're showing you at this point is actually just from about 45 minutes. That's as long as that time lapse was. And the tide came in so quickly. And to that point, it's going to get even higher for today. We spoke with some folks as well who have lived in Charleston their entire lives. And they were telling me they hadn't seen that part of the beach so rough in years. Take a listen to what they had to say.
Not except in a hurricane, and nothing like this.
Well, we know where it floods downtown because we grew up downtown and now we're out here. But you just can't get through, especially on a 8-foot tide. You can't. I mean, maybe 6 is okay, but not 8. No way.
Yeah, you know, you could just heard her there, Eunice, that was telling me that she didn't even attempt to try and get through all of that flooding because she said, you know what, I know it's going to be bad today, so I'm not even going to be heading downtown. And that was yesterday. So we are expecting it to get a little bit worse throughout the afternoon today. High tide around 11 a.m., so we're going to be keeping you posted here in downtown Charleston. We're starting to feel that rain, you guys. It's on the lighter side currently, but again, Britta, Marissa, we are expecting to see a lot higher or stronger rain totals starting to move on in. I'll send it back to you guys.
Yeah, I like how Bane's been hopping around from Sea Isle to
Isle of Palms,
Sullivan's Island.
Yeah,
or not Sea Isle. I keep saying Sea Isle. Isle of Palms. One of the isles, Bane. But yeah, it's going to be a long 24, 36 hours getting through that, and then hopefully improving by the tail end of the weekend. But regardless, we're in it for the long haul. Bane, appreciate that update out of Charleston, South Carolina. And we'll continue to focus in on the Southeast, not just South Carolina, but we want to take it further down into Florida. Florida has been dealing with the onshore wind and the rain, complements of that stalled boundary. You're taking a look into Fort Lauderdale this morning, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and you can see some of the clouds in the distance. When you talk about the eastern seaboard, the east coast of Florida, those onshore winds have been very problematic. The St. Johns River is one example. We talked about the Indian River earlier in the week, but that onshore flow has meant that the rivers are packed and high. Yeah.
There's nowhere for extra water to go by any means.
No. And then,
the good news is I think a lot of the rain today for Florida stays offshore.
Yeah.
But I mean, it brushes the coastline. The Space Coast right now has rumbles of thunder.
Yeah.
And when these thunderstorms move onshore, they can dump a heavy amount of water in isolated areas. So I think the freshwater flooding is probably a lower end threat for Florida in comparison to that coastal flooding. I think that's going to be the kicker. Those frequent offending low-lying streets, they'll take on the water. And because it's very much tied to the tidal cycle and that persistent onshore flow, times of high tide are probably going to be more tricky than other times of the day.
Yeah, and I think to your point, a lot of the activity is currently offshore. Bane's in Charleston, South Carolina, so she has some of that activity, even some thunderstorms that we're picking up just off the coast. Could fill in later in the day, but the nor'easter really isn't a story for Florida. The wind will be a story, but as everything pivots to the north, it really becomes a mid-Atlantic and northeast issue. For Palm Beach, Florida right now, just some of the clouds, 78 degrees, so at least if nothing else, you're getting a break from the heat. Maybe a passing shower to the north, but you can
probably
see the palms.
The driest weather you have felt with it being a north wind. For Florida standards, it will feel drier. If you're not from Florida, you'll be like, nah, what are you talking about? But a north wind is innately going to make it feel different. It's interesting because when you look at the wind direction, Fort Pierce is directly in from the east. So the front is kind of stalled, kind of by Lake Okeechobee. It's right in there. So the Keys afternoons are still warm, muggy, and very stormy. And then to the north, you have that north wind.
That fall front.
I know.
Yeah,
it's like, why couldn't it just clear? No, it's to stick around and give us nor'easter.
Yeah, it likes to hang out right in the middle of Florida. You head further up the coast and you still have that coastal flood concern, which is why we have those warnings extending all the way through much of all the coast of South Carolina, including Charleston. And then you get further to the north and noticing that we have coastal flood advisories currently in place all the way to Norfolk, Virginia, coastal flood watches. And it really has to do with not just the energy that's being put into the Atlantic, not forgetting we have Jerry out in the distance. We have this forming low, but we just have a very tight pressure gradient, wind gradient, and that's really going to tighten up as we get further into the weekend.
Yeah, right now we have 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts in coastal North Carolina, and that's really, child's play compared to what we're going to see throughout this experience. We will easily clock tropical storm force wind gusts up and down the East Coast. So these coastal communities are going to feel the biggest impact with that.
Yeah, and you were talking about the isobars earlier. I love that we have it on because that's really the story, right? Is seeing the low eventually cut off as we head into Saturday morning, and then we start to feel the brunt of this system as we head into early next week.